Hey everybody, it's Dwayne from GitKraken here. I'm here with one of our awesome ambassadors and open source maintainers. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, Dwayne. My name is Dobbeleer. I'm the creator and maintainer of Oh My Posh, which is a cross-shell prompt teaming utility that displays like a plethora of information right in your terminal. I think people mainly use it, or at least the initial use case was mainly for Git. So that basically brought me also to your doorstep, seeing to bridge the gap between, getting started with Git accessibility, whatnot. It plays a huge part in, just visualizing that context right where you're at.
Thank you very much for making that project and for also being a GitKraken ambassador out there in the world. Do you remember your first experience with version control, or whether that first time was with Git or some other program?
I'm rather new school when it comes to software engineering because I started out my career as a watchmaker, meaning I didn't really touch anything computers professionally, I must add. And I started right away with Git. So came out of school, or at least was in school. We were all using Dropbox or any other means to collaborate, which wasn't the most efficient way of doing things. And start looking at Git from, just out of interest. It was rather painful to get started with, to be honest, because it has an insanely steep learning curve. It's not intuitive. It is a really weird concept if you're not used to it, especially if you're just used to, file structures and systems like that. So that really, for me at least, it was studying hard. So as if I had to study something else next to software engineering.
But we're really here to talk about your open source project, Oh My Posh, and that's what you got on your shirt. That's the website, ohmyposh.dev, which is awesome.
True.
Uh, so you gave us a quick high level in your intro, but where did this come from? Like, what was the motivation behind making your own open source project?
I think I was there initially in 2011, immediately started using GitHub as a way to just collaborate with people. So for me, that was just intuitive. I knew the platform made a lot of sense. So why not do it in the open? I had no idea at the time what open source really was or meant, or, the impact of having something out in the open. It started out originally as me proving myself, or at least proving to other people that you could actually have a great developer experience on Windows. I was working with a lot of Linux people at one of my previous jobs, and they all used their terminal. And obviously, they were all making fun of me because at the time I was building Windows Phone applications. So I think it's 2013, 2014, something like that. So I started experimenting with, can I make this experience as nice as what they have, like visually, just having that context in your terminal, be it terminal or CLI first developer, even on Windows. And I made that happen specifically for me, so not for anybody else. But then I got a lot of feedback. I pushed a lot of things on Twitter. People noticed this. I want to have that too. I said, okay, let me just see how I can publish it. At the time, it was actually PowerShell only. So it only catered, or at least catered to PowerShell, because that's where something was lacking. It didn't really exist outside of that, and there was no alternative. I started thinking, okay, how can I bring this to a level where anybody could just install it and benefit from it with like maybe 2-3 commands and you're done and you're good to go, which definitely wasn't the case before, because you still needed to understand like PowerShell and writing a custom implementation. But also you have configuration as code. So why not just have a configuration file that you can then render, and the engine does all the magic for you. You only need to know what you want to enable, which colors you would like to use, how you would like it to display. But obviously that original version never really got to that point. And I was already switching to Mac at the time, not using a Windows machine anymore. So I was using different shells, but I missed, having my own custom prompt in there because it was PowerShell only. I was using SSH. There are other shells as well, like Bash and whatnot. So that got me thinking, like 3 years back, I was like, let's do something cross-shell, because maybe the evolution is not to just stay in that specific zone, and having something that out of the box is easy to configure, easy to install, might just help a lot of other people in using other shells, other platforms too. So I rewrote the whole thing to be up to par where the original PowerShell version was. Think I launched that roughly 2 years ago out in the open as a beta. A lot of people jumped on it as well, and it only grew from there. And that's the moment when it really skyrocketed, because obviously you have the option to, or at least your audience becomes a lot bigger. So does the pressure as well, or at least the issue inflow and ideas that actually people just push at you, like, it would be cool if I was able to visualize this, it would be cool if I was able to visualize that. So the whole architecture also made a huge evolution from that start 2 years back in the new version, then the cross platform version. But open source was and is something that for me, it just came naturally. And it also helped the success of the tool.
Are you looking for people to contribute and sponsor and help make it better?
Obviously, one of the challenges being an open source maintainer is that, everything is done after and in between hours, right? There's no fixed schedule. It's also something that you can't live off, to be honest. You do it because you like to do it. It's some sort of a mission. There's a little bit of ego there as well, because you get that exposure and attention, obviously. So we're always looking for contributors who just might have an idea or want to pick up things. It could be really simple things like just, fix typos in documentation, because that happens, or incomplete steps in the documentation, because that's also one of the challenges. You always work with what you know. So writing proper documentation is a skill, right? So that input is very valuable, and those contributions are very welcome. I can just, either create an issue on GitHub, letting me know so that I'm aware of that, or just do a proposal around, maybe this would be a good way to change this around. It doesn't have to be a lot. We have a getting started guide as well on the website. If you want to really contribute functionally, something like maybe a new segment, new functionality, whatnot, there's a good guide in there where we also highlight the use case of GitKraken in the process, because we do realize that some people have a hard time really getting started with Git. Some of our contributors are also first-timers with Git and GitHub, and then the difference between the two is really challenging for most people, which I completely understand.
Thank you very much for all you do out there. GitKraken is very proud to help sponsor and keep the servers running for Oh My Posh, and we're looking for more open source projects out there to work with. So if you're listening out there and you have an open source project, let us know, and we'll take a look and see if it's the right fit for us to help with. What's something about Oh My Posh that you wish more people knew about? Is there a particular feature or functionality, or just something you wish more people were aware of?
Maybe one thing that people don't realize, because of the name, originally Posh stands for PowerShell in a way, but it's not limited to PowerShell only. You can use it in any shell that you want. So out of the box, we have support for Fish, ZSH, Bash, command prompt even, which is pretty crazy, but it's there. New shell as well, which is a new up and coming shell, but a really nice one. So, maybe that's a good statement. Like, don't let the name fool you. It's made so that your terminal looks posh anywhere you are, not just PowerShell.
As an open source maintainer, I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons along the way. What are some other tips you'd have for folks that are either thinking about open sourcing their project or just getting started as an open source maintainer?
Automation is key. Know that you will have limited time. And the more you can automate, the better. So that goes from facilitating things. And this is maybe the really good tip. We always look at automation purely from a testing point of view, but it can go a really long way. And that would be my key advice is, take your time, learn every time you think about, oh, could I have avoided this? If so, figure out how, act upon it, and it will only become more sustainable going forward.
So you're also a GitKraken ambassador. You mentioned that earlier. Do you have any advice you would give to someone that's either thinking about using GitKraken client or brand new to it?
I would say just do it. The thing is, if you're getting started with Git, it's always good to understand the underlying complexity or at least functionality. Then again, we also all have a job to do where sometimes pressure is high, but you still want to do it right. And now what GitKraken does is actually allow you for some really complicated tasks, possibility to do that in a very straightforward way, where you don't really always have to think about, okay, how does this really work under the hood? Or if I go to command line, what does this do? In the end, it's a lot more about having a good workflow in place other than the tools that you use. So even though I'm a huge hardcore command line fanatic, I also sometimes really like a good GUI that goes along with my workflow, and GitKraken does just that. It's a lot more in the end about the whole workflows around, pull requests, how you deal with your commit messages, etc., than, using the command line interface because it's cool, right? That's not the point. The point is to do your job. So if you're on the verge of looking for a good Git client, GitKraken to me, in my experience for the past, and I think I can say really like 4 to 5 years is the best one.
What advice would you have, or what tip would you give for someone that's checking out GitLens?
That's a good question because I use it almost without thinking about it. That's how good it is, actually. So I have that enabled in Visual Studio Code, and I'm just so used to it being around that I look at, okay, what changed in this file, this function, etc. Because that functionality is all there. Really helps me just figuring out how things evolved over time, because sometimes that gives a lot of context if we do our commit messages right, etc. But even if we don't, it really helps. So I don't have that, like, this is that really shiny feature, because in all honesty, if it wouldn't be there anymore, I'd be very annoyed. So for me, it's like, it just needs to be there, and then I can do my job correctly. It's not like I use this specifically for that. No, I use it because, the entire package is what really helps me do my work better and easier, and not always having to jump to the command line to, figure out what went on here, how did this change, where was this bug introduced or whatnot. So that really helps me just right where I am, which is key. And that's also like the philosophy of Oh My Posh. If you're working in the terminal, you might want a lot of information there. If I'm working in my editor, I might want a lot of information there. And for Git specifically, that's what GitLens does for me. So not having that there anymore would make me a lot less efficient.
Thanks very much for jumping on for this interview. Do you have any parting shots or any plugs, anything you think we should be looking up out there on the internet?
I'll just do a shout out there to that product because that really blew my mind in terms of how we could, elevate the CLI experience. There's a tool called Fig, F-Y-G, which actually does auto-completion, soon cross-platform, today only on Mac, for like a lot of tools out there. So, you type something, but then you're wondering like, what's the exact command for this? Is it -X? Is it -Y? I don't remember. So Fig actually allows you to see a context menu where you see all of the options and you get an explanation on, okay, what is it? So in terms of accessibility, like, getting that context right where you are without having to, go to Google and figure this out is very, very valuable. So, I love what they're bringing to the table, because that's something that nobody ever did before. Autocompletions existed, yes, for sure, but not this way. And that for me is like, if you have anything to check out, I would definitely give that a look, because it's pretty amazing.
What's the best way to find you online? Is it your shirt? Is it ohmyposh.dev?
Well, the best way to annoy me, or at least get in touch with me, is on Twitter. So at Jan de Dobbeleer, that's my whole name. That's where you can find me, or just, create an issue on GitHub. Also Jan de Dobbeleer, same name, for easiness. Makes it very accessible. So that's where I am on Twitter. I reply pretty fast. So, if you want to get a conversation going, that would be the place to go.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being a GitKraken ambassador, helping us spread the word out there. And thanks very much for Oh My Posh and for being an open source maintainer and contributor and making the world a better place.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.